This is Ray Mofield, and our recording today is originating at 908 Olive here in Benton, Kentucky, the home of Harry Hurley. Mr. Hurley is one of our leading citizens and has lived in the county much of his life. The program is presented on behalf of the Kentucky Archives of Frankfort, Murray State University's Pogue Historical Library, and WCBL Radio, Shelby McCallum owner. Mr. Hurley, it's a pleasure to be with you today. Sorry you've had some illness lately, but what we want to talk about is not your recent history, but things that have happened since you were a young man.
Yes.
You were born where?
In Smithland, Kentucky.
All right, that's an adjacent county,
Yes, sir.
Livingston County. And would you mind telling us how old you are?
89 years old.
89, and
Yes.
you're still working
Yes, sir.
in the real estate business.
Yes,
Well,
Yes, sir.
that's amazing. I've had the pleasure of knowing some of your children over the years. Of course, I guess Herb would be my closest friend in the group because we were in the same class at Murray State. Have you sent many people over there?
Four boys.
I guess you think you've paid your
I
tuition.
think so. I ought to own about half of it.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, very good. Who were your parents, Mr. Hurley?
My parents was Harry Dixon Hurley and Fanny Curry Hurley.
C-U-R-R-Y.
Yes, sir.
All right. Genealogists are among the groups that like to use these tapes. Do you happen to know your grandparents on either side?
No, really, I don't. I'm not sure about my grandfather Hurley. I think his name was Richard Hurley. I'm not sure. And he grew up in Livingston County. That's where my father was raised.
Mm-hmm. Did he die when you were young?
Who? My father?
Your father?
He died in 1977.
He lived quite a long time.
Yes, sir.
Uh-huh.
Yes, sir.
But your grandparents you don't really know about.
No.
Do you know from what country they came? Were they English, Irish, Scotch?
They were Scotch-Irish.
Which meant, I suppose, they came from what we call Northern Ireland today.
I'm not sure about that, but there's only two of them come over. And one of them settled up in Livingston or Crittenden County, somewhere up in there, and the other one went west.
All right, what about your early school days? Do you remember where you first started school?
Yes, sir. Coursey School. It was...
Where was Coursey located?
Well, I'll tell you what, at the time I started, it was known as Canada School. And it was way up in the woods above where those plants are down there in Calvert City.
Near Calvert. Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. And I remember...
you remember your first teacher?
Yes, sir. That was Mr. John Faust.
John Faust.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well,
And,
probably he's been dead for a long time.
Oh, yes, he's been dead a long time. But he was my first teacher.
What were these schools like? Do you remember anything?
Just a little old shotgun school there, and the kids walked through the woods. There wasn't no roads to it, and through paths. And I walked about a mile and a half right through the fields, wore gum boots.
Mm-hmm.
And after a few years, they moved that school down right across the road from Aniline Film.
Yes, sir.
And that was in that Coursey settlement.
Mm-hmm.
And the Coursey boys moved that house down there with oxens. And they called it then Coursey School.
So they used oxen at that time.
Yes, sir. They moved that house down there on rollers, and they had oxen that pulled the thing, you know, it wound the rope around and moved.
My dad used to talk about driving oxen. Did you ever drive oxen?
Yes, sir. I had a yoke of them on the farm there all the time when I was growing up. The old man, he wouldn't took nothing for a yoke of.
Were they hard to handle?
No, easy enough. It's my job every morning when we got through all the feeding and milking and everything is to yoke up this yoke of steers and have them ready to do anything that he wanted to do around the place. We used them instead of a wagon and mules or things.
Could they pull as much as a horse?
Oh, yes, sir. They'd pull more than a horse. And you could put them through any kind of a place, mud, sloughs. My uncle bought the cypress timber there on the old farm that I was raised on. There's an old cypress swamp down there in the bottom, river bottom. It's full of big cypress timber. He'd go out there and scaffold up it, have to scaffold up about 15 feet high to get above that holler and that big swell stump, you know, that grow on cypress trees. They'd cut down a whole tree and trim it up. And this guy, he had 3 yoke of cattle hooked together, all 3 of them. They'd go right out through that swamp and they'd hook onto that tree and bring it, the whole thing out there on dry land.
Well, that was better than mules could have done.
You couldn't put mules in there. Mules would have marred down, you know. These steers would mar down too, but if a pair of them marred down, the others would pull them out and they'd just keep going.
Keep going right along.
Yeah.
Well, back to school for a minute. What did you like most in school?
Well, I liked history mighty well. I never did get past the 4th grade in school. Early Johnson was my last teacher down there at Coursey School. And the folks raised me, moved off the farm, moved to Calvert City, and I was going to have to go into school out there, and I was kind of backward and bashford. I grew up down there on Tennessee River, and I just felt like I'd be kind of, you know, behind everybody there, and I quit school at that time. Early tried his best to get me to go ahead, but I didn't, and that's all the schooling I got. I went to work then, just like the old man gave me so much a month in my board.
You what did you do at recess? Do you remember any of the games you played?
Played baseball. I started playing baseball when I was about 12, 15 years old.
Now, your boys were all athletes. Herb made All-American basketball out of Kansas City once, and I remember that Buck played for the Thoroughbreds.
Played all the way through college. Yeah. Tommy, of course, he never did. You never did know Tommy, did you?
No, sir, I don't remember.
Well, he was a music boy, and he wouldn't walk from mid the street to see a ball game, but he'd hitchhike to New York to hear some kind of program.
Yeah. Well, people are different, of course. Do you remember was discipline pretty strict in the school when you were going?
Yes, sirree. Them teachers back them days, boy, you had to come up with your lesson. You had to sit up on that street, not be a seat, not be a talking around. They'd throw one of them dadgum pointers back there, and they didn't care if it hit you, where it hit you.
I see. Did you ever shoot paper wads?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Did you ever get a whipping?
No, I didn't. I should have, I know. But I was in a little old prayer meeting up on what we call Rough Ridge. That's the only place in the world a boy had to go from Calvert City. He was about 15 years old. And no boy sitting plumb across the house over there. I chewed up a great big wad of paper wall, half as big as your fist. And I throwed that across over there, and he dodged it, and it stuck on the wall. It made the awfulest racket. Poor old lady Shadrick, she was conducting the prayer meeting, and she said, "What was that?"
Nobody knew.
No, this old boy sitting over there, I throwed that. He said, "I don't know, Miss Shadrick, but there it is on the wall."
I see. When you, as a young man, do you remember anything about the amusements that young people engaged in? Of course, you didn't have television and radio.
No, we didn't have much. When I was just a boy growing up, I just tell Mama the other day, the only thing we had to go to was a bush arbor meeting somewhere, or a little old prayer meeting at a schoolhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell this to you. I had a stepbrother that was a sportsman of the whole gang. He always had a girlfriend, you know, in a horse and buggy.
Mm-hmm.
And we was at Corsa Schoolhouse, this little prayer meeting. He had his horse hitched out there, buggy. 4 or 5 of us boys decided to pull a stunt on him, and we put his hind wheels in front, his front wheels behind on that buggy.
Yeah.
And they were just sitting up like that.
The rear wheels commonly were taller, weren't they?
Oh, yeah. And when you done that, that buggy set up like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Him and his girlfriend come out and got in that buggy, and they hadn't gone far. We was laying over in the weeds. And his horse was named Dan. He said, "Whoa, Dan." And his girlfriend was named Maud. He said, "Maud, what in the hell's the matter with this buggy?"
Yeah. And of course, you boys just laughed till you
died.
split your sides.
But we didn't say it. We didn't let
You didn't
him
tell
know.
him.
And he got looking around. And he said, "Them goddamn boys changed the wheel on this buggy."
Well, those are funny stories, of course. Now, could you tell us anything about dating customs that were different then than they are now, or what?
Dating?
Dating. When you, well,
Oh.
you were married. How old were you?
Well, I married when I was 20. My wife was 17.
Mm-hmm. Fairly young.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We slipped off and went to Metropolis, got married. Her daddy, he'd like to shot me if he could.
But
We
you
drove
were,
a horse and buggy to Paducah and got on a steamboat and went down there and got married. And,
did you see, there were trains in Paducah by then, weren't there?
oh yeah, there's a train that went down of a morning to Paducah, come back at even about 4 o'clock. You could go down, stay all day, and come back out on train.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. How did you earn a living when you were first married,
I
Mr.
was
Hurley?
on a farm.
You were
I
farming.
was working for $20 a month, my board, when I got married. Married in January. The old man said, "I ain't gonna raise your wages. You can move down on the farm in one end of the old big farmhouse. And I'll furnish you a cow. I'll furnish you sorghum molasses and a place to live and give you $20 a month the rest of the year." Well, I worked the rest of the year that way. We moved down there in a 2-horse wagon. That's all we had.
Yeah.
Somebody give us an old bed and table and a couple of old cane bottom chairs. Worked a year. He called me up. He said, "You better come out now and we'll figure up, make a deal for a new year." I went out, And we figured up there, he owed me $90. I hadn't like that much taken up all he owed me. He gave me a check, and then he kind of took me in as a partner on everything, you know, on the farm, to stay there and run it, stock, crops and all.
I suppose in a way to have lived during the year and had $90 left wasn't terribly bad, was it?
Well, no, sir. I got on my horse and went back down to the farm, and my wife was cooking dinner. She said, "How did you come out?" I said, "Honey, you're looking at a pretty well-to-do feller." She says, "Well, how well-to-do?" And I pulled that check out. That is the biggest check I've ever seen. Now, I ain't no lie.
Yeah.
That check looked bigger than $1,000 would today.
Yeah.
And I was proud of it.
I know you were. What was farming like then? You just
Well, farming was rough. You done it all with mules.
did you raise what, tobacco?
Yes, sir. We raised. Well, our main crop was corn and wheat and hay, peas, and stock. This old man who raised me was a stock dealer. He had lots of stock all the time, and bought and sold stock all over that end of the county. Every time a farmer had anything to sell, he'd call him up and sell it to him. And I was brought up in that. I commenced buying livestock when I was 12 years old. Just farmer had.
Where did you sell it back then?
We sold it all in Paducah. We had old man T.A. Jones and Cult Brothers, who was running butcher shops in Paducah. You know, T.A. Jones, he had a slaughterhouse out there, and he finally wound up with a cold storage. And they had stalls in the market house down there where they sold their meat. And we sold all our stuff in Paducah to them fellas. We'd buy it, and keep it a few days maybe. We'd buy any kind of a hog a fellow had to sell, pigs or anything else. Raise them up, fatten them out, sell them.
What were the roads like then?
Didn't have any. The road, I'd leave the farm there with a load of hogs, 12. I had a hog frame I could put 12 hogs in, 200-pound hogs. And I'd hook to a wagon there and put 12 hogs in it and put 4 mules to it. And
You needed that many because the roads were so muddy.
Yeah. Go right down that road to river, right down the river to Little Cypress. And boy, she was bad. It took 4 good mules to pull that wagon, and they had to be good ones. They was 1917. You don't remember that.
No, sir, I wasn't quite born then.
Well, that's right. We had the worst winter in this country we ever did have. It started in the fall of 17 and went on over in 19 and 18. Tennessee River froze over solid. I walked across it. You could have drove a team of mules across it. Well, it stayed on all winter. Snow and sleet, it just kept us sleeting and snowing and getting deeper all the time. And T.A. Jones called me. It had been on about 3 weeks. He said, "Harry," he says, "I haven't got a hoof in my pen." And he says, "There's not anybody else in Paducah got anything." And says, "We're getting desperate. It's getting terrible here. Nobody can't get to town with nothing." And he said, "People's going to get hungry." He said, "Do you think you could make it in here with a load of hogs?" Well, the snow was about 3.5 feet deep right then.
Boy.
And I said, "Well, I don't know, Mr. Jones, but I could try. It's going to be bad." He says, if you think you can make it, just load 'em up and come on and forget the price. Well, I loaded up 12 hogs in this hog next morning about 4 o'clock and started. And I had to break my road from the farm down there.
Nobody had been along.
No. I broke the road from the farm to Reedland. And them 4 mules, we'd hit places in the snow drift. They could just pull that wagon maybe for 50 feet.
You'd have to stop and rest them?
Stop and rest them. There's witless sweat all over. And it took me all day long. I got into his place that evening about 4 o'clock.
Boy, that's an awful trip.
You betcha.
And stock can take pneumonia themselves, can't they?
Hmm?
I said horses can get pneumonia.
Oh, yeah. I put my mules up out there at his slaughterhouse. All of them but one got on it and rode downtown, put him in the wagon yard, and went to a hotel. But
how much did it cost to stay all night? Do you remember?
about $2 in the hotel, in the best hotel they have.
Maybe the Palmer House.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll tell you, this don't sound very nice, but I'd been out in that cold all day on that mule. I rode the lead mule and drove them. I got on that mule and rode him down and put him in a wagon yard and fed him good, and I went in old Rock Saloon. I said, give me a hot Tom and Jerry. And he give it to me. And I drank that, and I said, give me another one.
You
He
were
fixed me up.
chilled to the bone.
Did you ever drink a hot Tom and Jerry?
No, sir, I don't know what it is, really.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's eggs and whiskey and flavored up with little flavoring of some kind, and it's hot. I drank them 2 hot Tom and Jerry's, and I went and eaten me a good supper and went to bed, and I just died till the next morning. Didn't give me a bad cold and nothing. I got on that mule and come out and got on my, hooked them up and come home.
Did you get fairly good price for the hogs?
Oh, yeah, he paid me extra. And, I forget now, 5 or 6 cents on the pound more than they was bringing, but of course that wasn't too much.
No. Do you remember anything, Mr. Hurley, about Benton in the early days, the county seat, what it was like around the square, who the merchants
Okay.
were, or some of the
God,
county officers maybe?
When I first began to come to town, Ray, there wasn't the streets is all gravel.
No pavement in Benton
Wasn't
then.
no pavement. This lot right over here where the church and Roy Boyd and them lives with the big vacant lot there and a pond right in the middle of it. That's where the people would park their wagons and buggies and horses when they'd come to town on first Monday. And
That was trade day, wasn't it?
that is trade day, yeah, they'd come here. Tater day, see, them days they had wagons and hacks parked all around that court square with sweet potatoes in them. Farmers would come in and buy them and take them out and bed them. And there was a row of trees along right in front of the stores there. And they built boxes up around them trees, you know, to keep horses from gnawing the bark off of them. That's where everybody hitch their horses there, and over at the Long Court Square too, they hitch them along in there. But on first Mondays, especially on Tater Day, they had all of the court square all around there was took up with wagons and buggies and hacks and things, anything they could haul sweet potato in. Yeah, it was a very small town then.
Yeah.
There's just 2 or 3 little stores around the square there, and maybe a hamburger joint or 2, small restaurant. I'd leave down there at the farm The old man raised lots of horses, mules and colts. He'd want to show 'em off, and he'd bring 7 or 8 of them and want to bring 7 or 8 of them to Benton on first Monday. I'd get on my horse. I had a saddle horse, lead the old mother mare, and the rest of them would follow. Yeah. Take all day long, come up here and go back.
I can remember Tater Day as, I think the first time I ever remember coming was 1930, when I was 8 years old. And I thought I had the best time I ever had in my life because we lived way out in the country, long ways from town. And I got to buy a bologna and cheese sandwich and drink a soft drink, Big Orange.
Yeah.
Dad spent a dime on me.
Well, I'll tell you a little thing like that now. The ferryman up there at Haddock's Ferry was having a barbecue on Saturday. And our farm joined the ferry farm. I could just go right through the field. The old man always went to Paducah on Saturday. He asked me that morning, he said, "You want to go to that barbecue?" And I said, "Why, yes." I was about 12, 13, 14 years old. He said, "Well, when we get through doing upper work, you get you on some clean overalls, clean shirt, and you can go." And I did. He gave me a quarter, which I was tickled to death.
Oh, of course.
I walked through the fields and got up there pretty early. And this ferryman knew that I was pretty good with the skiff. He says, "Harry, I'm going to make a deal with you." I said, "Okay, what is it?" He said, "You go down there and get in that skiff, and bring them people over here from across the river, and I'll give you a dime a trip." Well, by George, that's the deal. I went down there and got in that skiff. I made 5 trips by about 11 o'clock, bringing people over to the barbecue. They'd come over there and holler,
50 cents in a half a day?
50 cents. And I had my quarter. Well, I went up to the barbecue about 11 o'clock. I bought me a barbecue sandwich, a dime, and a pop. I'll tell you, they had a bottle back then that looked like strawberry.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a thing in a stopper that you had to hit it up against a plank, push that stopper in to drink it.
Mm-hmm.
I got me one of them pops in my barbecue and got out there on the stump, and I had a feast.
That's right.
I had money left.
That was a wonderful day. Well, you know, Mr. Hurley, the time flits away very rapidly. Do you have anything special you'd like to tell us before we have to sign off? I seemed like one of your boys told me that you remembered the Virgin Timber Stand.
Well, as I said, the only virgin timber that I know of in the country was there on the farm. The old man wouldn't sell a foot of it to nobody. He kept it and preserved it. And there's big, nice, large red oak trees, 2 or 3 feet through, all over that. He had about 15 acres there on the farm of that kind of timber. And of course, back them days now, we cut timber and hauled it sawmill to build barns and stuff like that, anything we needed on the farm. Make boards for roofs. And
You didn't order lumber from the state of Washington and Oregon.
no, sir. We made it right there on the farm. There's always a little sawmill somewhere around,
Mm-hmm.
And we'd cut that timber and haul it there and have it. We've built a big cattle barn there on the farm. Cut every bit of the timber there on the place. As the first cattle barn built in Marshall County, it didn't have no post in the
Mm-hmm.
loft. Self-supporting roof.
So you were a pioneer in that regard.
Yes, really it was. A fellow by the name of Hall helped me build it. Lewis Hall lived there in Calvert. And we built that barn ourselves. Put up the first silo there was in that country down there.
Well, another landmark, silo.
Yes,
You
sir,
had a
that's
dairy barn, I guess.
No, well, we just used it to feed beef cattle.
Beef cattle.
Yeah, we fed out a lot of beef cattle. We didn't do no dairy. We always had 7 or 8 old cows to milk and mess around with, but we pour the milk out of the pigs and drink it what we could. And
Mr. Hurley, it's been a real pleasure for me to talk with you, and I want to thank you for letting me come into your home and visit with you. And we
8 old cows to milk and mess around with, but we pour the milk out of the pigs and drink it what we could. And
Mr. Hurley, it's been a real pleasure for me to talk with you, and I want to thank you for letting me come into your home and visit with you. And we hope this will be enjoyed by everybody at the State Archives in Frankfort, the Murray State University Pogue Library, the Marshall County Library, and, of course, let's don't forget the Monday shows on WCBL Radio.
yes, sir. Okay.
Thank you once again. I'm Ray Mofield, and that ends our broadcast for today.
Thank you so much.